Gentlemen, the second plenary session will now begin. Please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the moderator of the second plenary session, CNN Global Affairs Analyst, Kimberly Dozier.
Inflation is back on the agenda. The rise of inflation occurred in the aftermath of the global activity rebound out of COVID-19, when global value chains were severely disrupted. The Russia-Ukraine conflict added new strains over the global economy, raising energy and food prices. Inflation brings more uncertainty and could be the catalyst of ongoing transformations. It could strengthen even further the hands of those preaching globalization and advocating for self-reliance behaviors. Inflation can also lead to questioning the balance of power between workers and capital holders, heralding a new era in labor market negotiations. Are we heading toward a new inflation age? How can domestic policies cope? Can this inflation trigger more profound transformations of the worldwide economic system?
Thank you, everyone. And that is a good preview, as was the previous panel, into what we're going to look at over the next hour. And I'm going to be trying to pull a lot of you into this conversation about some of the divide between North and South, the wider Atlantic and the global South, and what can be done to knit it back together at a time when we all know the North has a whack-a-mole problem right now. Its attention is focused on Ukraine and almost nothing else. And to help us puzzle through this, I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with the home team, Ambassador Yousef Amrani, who is the ambassador to South Africa and designated to the EU. Ambassador Amrani. Well, you know, the person I do see in the window, in the door up there, is Vincenzo Amendola. He is a member of the Italian Parliament and has held many senior positions in the Italian government, including Minister of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Amrani, thank you very much. And next we'll have Minister Amendola, please. And lastly, we have Matata Ponyomapan. He's the chairman of the board of the Congo Challenge, and he's also the former Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Prime Minister. Here, I shall let you take that seat, and I will take that microphone. Oh, you may, please. Okay. So, I have all warned you that I'm going to be asking you a lightning round question to start. But first, some directions for the audience. Please have your translation device handy, because the Prime Minister has warned me that while he might give us a headline in English to some of my questions, he prefers to answer in French. Also, I am going to be asking you a couple of word cloud questions, so please have your Atlantic Dialogues app somewhere close to hand. And there's also a way in the app to send questions our way. So please send questions. They will pop up on the screen up there. I'll see them on my iPad here, and weave you into the conversation. About halfway through, I'll be switching to you in the audience, and we've got a lot of major decision makers and thought leaders in the audience, so we want to hear what you have to say about this topic as well. So with that, I would like to start with my lightning round question, which is, how do we get the wider Atlantic to pay attention to issues in the Global South again? Home team, Ambassador, please start.
Well, thank you very much. Before answering your question, you will allow me to say that I'm very much moved today, a few hours from a semi-final that is between France and Morocco. I must confess that our topic is very relevant to multilateralism. But I believe that football is more multilateral
Is it very relevant?
than the UN. Yes.
Is it very relevant because people did not think that Morocco could make the finals?
To show to the world how much a nation is united, how much our ambition is common, and how much strong we are when we are working together. And this is, I think, football has given us a lesson how to move forward in building this new world. Morocco is playing for Morocco, is playing for Africa. And I think another element which is important that also it is relevant with our team is that friendships, brotherhood are elements that are governing football and should govern our interaction with this complicated world.
And never again in World Cup football will anyone count Morocco out, more importantly.
Right.
But let's go on to the question of how do you get their attention again?
Okay, first I think we need to do our own homework internally. I will be very frank, straightforward, and I know you like that. You are the third time you are moderating a panel where I am participating. I think it's a problem. No?
Yeah, we've lost your audio.
Okay, I think it's the emotion. No, I think there's a problem now. No?
Is it my problem because I'm sitting on the wrong side?
You are.
Here, you know what? Thank you. You're right.
Yes.
There's a microphone.
Okay. So I think we should do our own homework internally, building our strong economies, building democracy, preparing ourselves to interact with our neighborhood. It's important. I'm talking from an African perspective. And we need to have a strong African Union. We need to have peace and stability.
I appreciate that, but how does that get the North to pay more attention to the South?
Well, we have to tell a new narrative that were essential for the interaction with our world, that we have did our homework, I want to say, and to convince them to listen through dialogue. I think if there is no dialogue, if there is no listening, we're not moving nowhere. I'm talking also about the relation with the EU, for example, which is our major partner for Morocco. We have the tools, but we need, as always, Mr. Advisor says, I will quote him, we need three elements: the leadership, the commitment, and the vision.
Those are great buzzwords, but
Yeah.
I'm not hearing how that would make the North pay attention.
Well,
But
I say dialogue, sitting together, listening to each other, sharing the same values, sharing the same ambition to work up for a stable. But of course, to do this, to be able to work, to interact, we must have a stable environment for this interaction, whether it is Europe. Unfortunately, for example, in the region, in my region, in the Maghreb, it's not working. We're not, but it is the South-South cooperation. It's not working because we have, for the reasons, obvious reasons. And for that, we need to bring up strong economies. Because what matters,
strong economies.
Strong economies,
Okay.
because what matters at the end of the day for your partners is how much job do you create, how much growth do you achieve.
So you're basically saying that if the Global South was better able to stand on its own in terms of economy,
Yeah.
then it would be better able to be considered a first world player in some of these conversations. We're going to keep going on this, but I'd love to bring in...
We need also our partners to be on board, sharing the same values, taking care of our identities, and also showing the values.
I think they would argue that they do share the same values, but it's translating that to attention and the kind of action we're seeing on Ukraine. Prime Minister, what do you see as a way to get them to stop looking at the shiny object and pay attention to the Global South again?
I would like first of all, I'd like and acknowledge
the organizers of the Atlantic Dialogue for extending to me the invitation for the second time around to these debates. And I think that the very question of multilateralism is enshrined in and is fitting in the logic of sharing of those who are in the set, in the compound, for a better service to those who really make up or comprise the whole set. I mean by that the multilateralism fits within a framework, capitalistic logic, which aims to be able to exchange to the benefit of each and every one. And the importance here of each and every member in the entire set must account for what they bring or provide as elements of this sharing that I mentioned. And it is also important here to highlight that the attention that should be given to each and every one within the group is essentially substantiated, vindicated by the contribution of each and every one. And in the case in point here, it is important to underscore the importance of the production. It is necessary that the countries of the South may and be able to produce more, not only quantity-wise, but also quality-wise. Let's take, for example, a whole set. Alors, si vous le permettez.
To make sure I understand, so basically, you're preaching self-reliance as the way to, again, a little bit like what Ambassador Amrani was saying, if I'm hearing correctly, stand on your own 2 feet, and then you become an equal player. Am I understanding?
Definitely so, ma'am. Definitely. Because the multilateralism game is a game which consists in exchanging. And in the case in point, the trade is the key indicator that tries and reflect the contribution of each and every one. And here, what I wanted to say in substance is that it is a must that the countries of the South, so that they be seen, that they attract more attention. It is necessary, it's a must that the production be more and more important, and that the quality of that production be important. That's what I meant by quality and quantity. In the global Atlantic, 80% of the exchanges are made in the North Atlantic area between the United States and Europe. So this is 80%, and 40% of the production of trade in this block, well, is more important in the whole of the world trade. Let's take, for example, industrial production of the countries of the South. It does account for less than 5% of the whole production of the Atlantic world. And hence, I think that here we have to really attend to it, see to it that the production, including industrial, that is to say the industrial contribution of the countries of the South, be given the possibility to increase both quality and quantity-wise, so that the attention of the North Atlantic be given greater importance and be improved. And I think that's a problem of governance, as we did say here in the first session. And also a problem of governance, but also a problem of leadership. The leadership should be improved, and the governance should also be improved in such a way as the production to grow.
If Africa could become a manufacturing center to rival India, Vietnam, give China a run for its money, of course it would get their attention. So, Minister Amendola, we come to you, who technically you're a member of the North, but you're close to the global South.
I'm Mediterranean. We are in the middle of the... But first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Why I'm referring to the first 2 panels, because if you look what we have discussed since this morning, you have an agenda of this cooperation. Why I'm saying so? Because after the wake-up call of COVID and also the war that we were discussing so in a tragic way, we saw that the value chain and also the trade and also the market economy and also the line between the continent are shaking and trying to find some balances. For 10 years, we have discussed about this, the global governance in terms of institution without reaching nothing. The fragility of the worldwide institutions are clearly in front of us. Our problem is to have an agenda. What we have discussed since this morning: food, water, climate change. So there are all topics that they are describing, not just the relation between the people and the continent within the North, within the dimension that we have to build up together, but we are discussing how to reconnect the reality of the global and foreign affairs policy theory to the reality of the people that we are living. Because we know that the climate change, the greenhouse gas reduction are a priority after the Paris Agreement, but we know that we have together some point in common. I make a short example, just to clarify. A few days ago, the European Commission authorized the financing the electrical cable between Italy and Tunisia. Two continents now, not just with the pipeline, but also with the electrical cable that will be connected, because the idea is that between the two shores in this Mediterranean hub, we are connecting two continents to produce new energy. You know, this discussion on this electric cable started when I entered in the government in 2014. 2014, when I was going to Brussels to discuss about this cable, I said, wonderful idea, but we have other priority. Of course, after COVID and with the war, with the energy consumption, production, and with the Paris Agreement target that we have, everything changed. And we know that we can move faster if we have concrete targets. Climate change, food, water consumption. I heard something about agriculture this morning that are common to the two shores, to the two continents, and probably building up to this, not theory, but to concrete also elements, we can rebuild up a multilateral institution theory that nowadays, sorry to say, but is quite fragile. To be pragmatic, we have many points that are uniting ourselves, because we are not living in a transition. You know, in Europe we are living in a green digital transition. God bless us, it's not a transition, it's a revolution. It's a huge change in the civilization on our humanity. It's like an industrial revolution that has a clear speed because it's boosted by the digital economy and the technological transformation, but has a limit. And the limit is the climate neutrality that we have to face, all of us. So if you compare what we are living all together, and we have common agenda priority, that is not the useless debate that we had for 10 years about how we build up the governance of this global level, probably we can reach some result. Multilateralism in a multipolar world, 8 billion people with different actors that nowadays cannot be classified under the liberal democratic view that is mine, but I understand that this world is more complex. They should have project, pragmatic approach, and especially common target. And the common target are the most basic that we ever heard in the humanity: food, water, energy production, and how technology and how the civilization of the machinery and the technology can be used for this target that can build up a new cooperation. Green Deal is basically a European and African project. Means technological transfer, means imbalances that we are going to reduce, and means also to liberate many people from some exploitation that we lived in the past.
So that's a very positive example of North-South cooperation that is ongoing. But I want to invite you, I set up a straw man in my question. Is the premise of my question incorrect? Has the global North started ignoring the global South? Or are they actually doing 2 or 3 things at once?
No, my friend this morning, the former Prime Minister, said something really interesting on the Ukraine war. How we look the war, how we look the Russian invasion in Ukraine. It's not a question of ideological debate between Europe, Western alliances, and Russia. There is, of course. Putin is speaking about illiberal democracy, revanchist nationalism since years without that we were listening. So it's another theory of how to organize the global order. It's old because it's speaking about some evil from the past, but it's very new because in the chaos, in the fragility of the multilateral organization is affirming not a legal criteria, is affirming the sphere of influence criteria. How we look this reality, especially because from the southern dimension they say, sorry, but in the past also some Western did the same, affirming some unilateral action. I understand this point, but the reality that we are living nowadays is something that this aggression is creating a new game where we have to reorganize the table. You remember Barack Obama times ago, years ago, say Russia is just a regional power. Let them go. The problem is that in this chaotic world, nowadays, nobody wants to be a regional power. And now these actors are going to reorganize the table of the balance of power. This will create an order. So I understand the point and the different point, but it's not a European war, this. It's a question also how you rebuild an international legality. Because if you want to have a multilateral architecture, you have to decide if you start from the point of the use of force or the point of use of legal criteria. And even if the Western and the European did mistake, enormous mistake, even within the Mediterranean, I mean, if I speak the case of Libya or Syria, it's clear. But if we want to reorganize, we have to have a pragmatic approach that links the interest in terms of economy development, liberating the forces of the people. And secondly, we have to rebuild up an architecture where it's clear the starting point. Europe is also in a wake-up call. As you know, Europe produces more concern than action. We have a list of concern of the foreign ministry for years. We express concern on everything. But concern doesn't mean action. Nowadays, for Europe, foreign policy means energy policy, means migration policy, means trade, means that we have to build up also in this global order our role. But our role cannot be based on the principle that we allow somebody else to decide by force what is the architecture that we want to build up.
Before we dig into things like the ills of multilateralism or this possible new axis that's being set up of Russia, China, v. NATO, et cetera, I did want to ask the word cloud question to the audience, if the organizers could put my first word cloud question up. And I'm just getting everybody used to going to that app because it's a good way to participate. And when it pops up, we'll go from there. But here we go. What does the Global South need from the wider Atlantic? I'm asking you to boil it down to one word because I am asking the impossible today. So, respect, young leaders. Is that from some of the young leaders in the audience, I wonder? Let's see, understanding, less interference. This is one that I keep hearing from US diplomats, that one of the reasons that they say, you know, China and Russia are stealing a march on us in terms of African investments because they're transactional. They don't have to stick to values. They don't have the Congress saying you have to have human rights verification when you give out money. Let's see, what else do we have? Transparency, World Cup spots, nice. Better security collaboration. All right, let's take a couple. Prime Minister, I saw you nod when the word respect went up there. Is there enough respect, and does it extend not just from the people whose portfolio is Africa, but to the wider leadership and then down to the populations?
As a matter of fact, Africa does need respect to be shown to it, undoubtedly. But what we need also to know is whether the respect is not gotten voluntarily, out of will. It should be deserved. The Africans or the Southern Atlantic must deserve and grasp the respect. And this is where I establish a nexus between respect and another word that has gotten again and again a recurrent thing, the young leaders. And I'm of the opinion that Africa could be, no, in order to be respected, Africa does need new type of leadership. A new breed of leadership. Leadership cannot be understood of without values. Talking about values is tantamount to talking about good governance. Now, for Africa to be really respected, Africa must provide its fair share in the very democratic sum game in the exchange, trade exchange and multilateralism, because it does have a content. The purview of the content is the contribution of each and everyone. And for you to be respected in such an environment of multilateralism, you must provide your own contribution, and your very own contribution must be not only quantitative but also qualitative. For you to be able to really have that respect you're seeking, and here we're really conducting research and survey which goes to show that the leadership is the most important determinant, and even in the relationships between the Western world and the southern of the Atlantic part, we have to really look into the importance of the aid in order for this aid be more channeled to the towards a new form of leadership that be able to trigger the mechanism of the industrialization of the African continent, or at least of the southern part of the African continent, including the Latin American countries. Now, imagine with me for a second that all of the Southern Atlantic region, industrialization-wise, is not even bordering at the 10%, less than 10%. Today we're talking about China, because China accounts for no less than 25% of the industrial contribution globally, even more than 18% with the United States, and Morocco is 1.13. South Africa stands at, and Brazil, that stands at what, 0.4% of the global industrial contribution. How do you want to get the respect when you provide only 1.4% of the world market of industrialization? You cannot really pretend to be respected with that figure.
Headaches that you had to deal with as Prime Minister and are still trying to tackle now. Ambassador Amrani, picking up on that idea that respect needs to be earned, I still want to point out that the U.S. had a major election scandal. We had the January 6th insurrection. Across Europe right now, in the European Union, there is an MP scandal where MPs are being investigated for taking kickbacks from countries, possibly including Morocco. That was the latest BBC World Service report today. I want to cite my sources. Is the global north or the wider Atlantic, are they still being hypocritical? Are they still coming down to African nations and lecturing?
I would like to pick up where my Prime Minister has already said, that when it comes to Africa, our continent has no vocation to be passive in this multilateral world in crisis that has shown its limits.
I couldn't quite hear that,
yeah,
sorry.
I said, no, we should do our own homework as Africans, of course, and we should take ownership of the challenges. And to be able to be respected, we need, I think, we need to take ownership of our own destiny through commitment that put the human dimension in the center of our strategy.
I'm assuming that means also taking ownership of mistakes.
Of course.
Do you have, what is the Moroccan government, for instance, saying about the accusations against this MP?
Well, I'm not going to make any comment on information brought by the press, because I know I've been working for 41 years on foreign policy, and I don't want to make any comment on information brought by the press. This is the European issue. It's been dealt with in Brussels. Anyhow, when times comes, my authorities will make the appropriate comment on this issue.
But doesn't even the fact of the investigation going on mean, I, as a journalist, have time and time again listened to, at this forum and others, diplomats come from the north and tacitly lecture Africa on anti-corruption, this, that, and the other. So are they being hypocritical?
No, what I can tell you...
Or are they now being a little bit more humble about their criticism?
No, what I can tell you is that Morocco also did its own homework a long time ago, fighting corruption, building democratic state. You give me now the opportunity to speak about my country. We are moving forward, not because we reached the semifinals of the World Cup. This is an achievement, it's important.
There's a theme here.
But we have also achieved a lot, thanks to the priority given by His Majesty King Mohammed VI to women and to the young generation to be a strong country, to be a partner. If today European Union has advanced status with Morocco, because we did our homework, we are sharing the same values, more or less, with our strong identity and cultural heritage, but we also face together the same challenges. We're always talking when it comes to migration, for example.
But you're very carefully sidestepping my question of, is the North still being hypocritical in its criticism of the South?
You are doing your own job as journalist. I'm doing my own job as diplomat.
And he's showing his years of experience, delicately and politely sidestepping my question. Respect.
No. Of course, I'm here to listen to you.
Back at you. Okay, well, if I may ask the minister sitting next to you.
I'm not diplomatic. I was corrupted as to go to jail point. No discussion, because this is not a question for Morocco. This is a question for some member of the European Parliament.
But I'm saying, but doesn't that mean that
there is a slight change?
Aren't we in the North hypocritical?
No, it's not. The point is something that the press doesn't underline. The European integration that is still ongoing, needs a lot of work, but is creating, just because we have this world order that is very disorganized and very turbulent, we need a community of destiny that means 27 countries that are united with institution, with democratic power.
Without another Brexit.
This means, Brexit, I don't want to speak about Brexit. I think the economic result of Brexit are clear on the table. But just to underline that it's not a question of a club of friends sitting in Brussels and having some fun. Because the institution, the 27 countries that are negotiating, the European Parliament elected by the people, are becoming always more important. And are becoming stronger year by year, crisis by crisis. European, they always make some step forward after the crisis. We are wonderful in this. Before COVID, we were fighting for a budget, European budget, that was a disaster. After the COVID, we issued a bond that was something forbidden by some country, let's say, legislation. And we are doing the same also for Ukraine. We are doing something that we never experienced, even creating a common defense. So it's becoming really more important. And this means that the attention on what we live all together in Brussels is very important. And sometimes some member of the parliament, the judge will decide, they are doing something against the value. But in this case, it's quite easy. Sorry, I'm not an ambassador, so I can be clear. The member of parliament that are corrupting democracy, so go to jail without even any discussion.
So, but that brings up the question of...
I say because some of them are Italian, so I make it easier.
He is on the record.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ambassador, you want to jump in?
I was going to comment only on the ambition of the European Union, because you wanted to... Listen, Morocco has an ambition with the European Union. We want to experiment in new tools with EU. But unfortunately, and he was a minister, except Italy and Spain, the European Union has not a real Mediterranean policy. Europe is looking west. I know Ukraine is a priority, it's security, the other countries in pre-accession, Moldavia, but we cannot continue to work to express this ambition with EU, and we don't have EU responding to our expectation.
You mean the EU's focused on the prize of Washington, D.C.?
On new neighborhood policy.
Pardon?
No, on the neighborhood policy.
I got it.
Okay, two-thirds, one-third as far as
Behaving like regional powers.
No, of course, what we are working, doing our own homework. And now you're going to ask me a question about what we did in the wider Atlantic later on in the region. We did our also homework. But today we need to have a strong partnership with EU. We don't want any imposition. We need to, of course, to sit down, to plan together, and to work to achieve something, because it is in the interest of the European Union to have a stable Maghreb, to have a regional integration scheme working in the Maghreb, to fight terrorism together, because we are committed to work with you, to design, but we need this ambition, new ambition. I know Europe is divided today, we know. And since Lisbon Treaty, our come to the European Parliament has become an important tool on foreign policy. It was not before. Since Lisbon Treaty, the European Parliament is now a key player. So we need Europe to redesign, to reshape, to revisit. This is also a crisis of multilateralism.
But may I say something? Because I'm very optimistic on this. If we start from the base of our future, it's quite clear, was always in the history of the humanity: energy, food, water. Imagine, and this is a project that they like even a lot in the north of Europe, not just in the south of Europe. Imagine that between Italy, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, we go up Spain, France, we create a circle of connection in terms of new renewable energy production, green hydrogen, that is the future that we know in 10 years probably will arrive. So it means creating a common platform of energy production. And this is in the interest of Europe, because also in Germany they want the green hydrogen pooling in the industry. And this is also the interest of Africa, because it means a transfer of technology that will go down. So Mediterranean, I'm sorry for who is not Mediterranean in this room, is the hub of this new joint venture. But we have to start from the base: agri-tech, food, water consumption, because technology is helping us to solve problems that in the past were against the nature, against the, let's say, the structure of the nature. Now can be turned in favor of the nature. So, like we discussed already in this panel.
I have a question for our Prime Minister. Do you see the European Union, with all of its trade rules, et cetera, as a good future market? Like if you're looking at, okay, I'm going to build this manufacturing base and our first target is X, where is Europe on your list of targets?
I think that your question is very relevant. It makes a lot of sense. And it goes within the framework of capitalism that is the basis of multilateralism. Europe, as like the United States, do need to receive assets, goods, and services from the south of continents, be it South America, Latin America, or Africa. And what we need to know, what it is that we need to give to Europe or to America. And what does America want? Does America wants to receive just nonsense or non-quality products and assets? Because when we buy from Europe, the United States, and China, we're seeking to purchase quality. And this is what is the very foundation and basis of multilateralism. We do know today that there are countries who are very successful. Look at Israel. Israel has very little water. It rains once a year in Israel. They have water shortages. They don't have fertile lands. They have not waters, but thanks to technology, thanks to leadership and good governance, Israel is exporting fruits to Europe. They are exporting Jews to Europe. So this is a problem. This is all about vision. we actually
investment, and Israel does have a lot of capital coming in. But to take us back to, you again are being uber diplomatic and not answering the, how hard would it be for you to sell goods to Europe? It would be a tough market, or would it not?
No. No.
Not really. I don't think so. Apologies. I am an economist. This is another hat that I had, but I do believe in the strength of quality. I do believe in the strength of quality, the power of quality. If you have quality, you go very far. You're going to force people to buy. And Europe needs to buy. Europe is buying, and the United States is buying. You have the GOA, for instance, that has been installed by the United States to promote trade and to export as developing countries products and goods and services to the United States. And you have in Europe the ACP mechanisms that allows African countries to export products, African, Caribbean, Pacific. But what it is that you need to export it, you have to do it in the framework of standards and rules. You cannot consider Europe like a trash where you can buy and sell whatever, but you only target quality products. Take China. China is selling quality products. You know, once European women were rebelling and they were really protesting because the European government or the European Union was imposing to import Chinese lingerie, and women in Europe were marching because these products or Chinese products are quality products, but they're cheaper. So we need to know what it is, what we need to do to break into the European market. But if we don't work, we don't produce, and we don't target the quality, and we're not compliant with the quality products, we're not going to be there.
Giving you all opportunities to beat up someone else, and each of you keeps saying, no, the problem is us, and here's what we need to do. Bravo. I just want to give a heads up to everyone in the audience. We've got about 35 minutes left, so I'm going to start looking for hands. Awesome. And if you could, I'm looking for, oh, sorry, may I have your microphone back? Unless someone has it. Now you can't answer any hard questions. Could you introduce yourself and let us know who you are, offer a thought, but especially a question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so very much. My name is Len Ishmael. I'm a senior fellow with the Policy Center of the New South. And I'm going to rephrase the question that you have been asking of your panelists, but specifically Minister of Senegal and also our friend from Europe. The EU New Green Deal, which is the root of a great new partnership, has implicit in it a series of policies that are inimical to the best interest of Africa, especially coming out of 2 years of COVID and now a war in Europe. There's a carbon border tax that you are not going to be able to satisfy. There are new standards and regulations for agriculture. It's not about quality. It's about partnerships in a relationship that need to respond to your need for a clear path to industrialization for Africa. I mean, so please don't be polite about it. I mean, this is an opportunity really to be expressive about what is needed. And if Africa doesn't articulate what it needs to ensure that this new industrial era doesn't bypass Africa, then I'm sorry.
Are you arguing that they've set too high a standard because it's for each other and that they have to have a sliding scale and let Africa off the hook, or is it?
No, I'm saying that the EU New Green Deal is ambitious for the EU and great, but it has serious implications for all trading partners, particularly developing countries who are not going to be able to get special and deferential treatment to get trade in. So, Minister, I'm on your side, but I'm saying please use this as an opportunity in your favor.
So, over to you, Prime Minister. Let's start with the Prime Minister.
Effectivement, je crois que vous avez totalement raison, parce que
Actually, in the multilateral games and negotiations, you have the weight of the partner that really matters. If you are facing the EU, is that you don't have all the technical and economic and financial support and really heritage. It is important for you to do and to go about very good negotiations. I remember an EU member states governments, he told me that 10 years ago when he used to negotiate with the Chinese, they were able to impose themselves while they were negotiating and trying to get a deal and conclude partnerships. But today, this very same minister from an EU member state is that what they used to impose to the China 15 years ago, they cannot do it today, simply because China has increased its overall negotiation capabilities and negotiation powers in terms of economic and financial production. So I fully agree with you, Madam. Africa, of course, needs to take its destiny at hand by having a leadership and governance that imposes itself, because if Europe is there where it is, had reached a level where it is, it's because that leadership that allowed it to become this developed continent. And in this regard, Europe is actually taking care of the European people, and the rest comes next and after this.
I want to react, because this is a point that we, in the Eurocentric debate, we are discussing a lot. What do I mean? As you know, we Europeans, we decided to have greenhouse gas reduction already 2030 by half, and 2050 climate neutrality. Other continents, other big players, China, India, of course, they have a different. Sharm el-Sheikh was not a success because we are not aligned in terms of decision. You can catch this point in two ways. One way in Europe is, but why we have to run so much? I mean, we take our time. We make the transition. We make changes slowly and slowly. Why we have to go buy electric car? Let's go still a bit with the normal, and then we see. Another way that is not based on good, let's say, good sensibility, but it's also based on industrial idea, is that after COVID, and also by COVID, and also by a document that is very important, coming from 2015, is Made in China 2025, that is changing the landscape of the Chinese vision of the international, let's say, industrial mechanism. We as Europeans, we have two targets. One is the climate change. And this climate change you can discuss a lot, but scientifically and also looking at our reality is a clear point that we have to address. And using this horizon also to make a revamping of our industrial base. A revamping means to be competitive worldwide, like we have been in the last century, and to create sustainable energy, sustainable, let's say, development in terms of industrial manufacture that we, in the last 10 years, we thought that we could outsource to China machinery and so on. So this is a point of reflection in Europe, very tough, very important.
Because you realize that outsourcing has led to a proliferation of pollution in China.
What they are discussing in the United States. I mean, Trump was a bit more, let's say, outspoken, but I don't think that Barack Obama or Joe Biden, they are moving in a different direction. This inflation legislation that are passing now is, let's build up again our machine.
But the Biden administration also passed one of the largest clean energy pieces of legislation.
But as you know, it's a state aid imbalances if you look at global market. But just to complete, if this theory works and Europe starts again to be industrial, as an industrial mind, that means research, means find the best solution in terms of technology, acknowledgement for agriculture. This means that we need a partner, and the biggest partner for this deal is Africa. Because we have the same interest, and because we have to transfer technology and to make a business together.
So you're saying that you could outsource the guts of the project to Africa, to African nations, and transfer the technology in the process, So you're saying that a rising tide lifts all boats,
but we are living in the
because
same...
you'd also be insisting on the environmental practices.
We are living in the same dimension. I mean, if the Europeans lose time in discussing about migration because they are obsessed by this migration and is a historical flow, also because the 56% of the population will come from Asia, so probably the problem will not be just in the Mediterranean shore, will be also in the other direction. But if we look the reality, throwing out this obsession of migration of the European fortress, we are not a fortress. If you look at our demographic trend in Europe, are disaster. And we look cooperation starting from a topic, and the topic are the most basic. And in this case of sustainable development goal, not in terms of theory, but in terms of action, means industrial revamping, machinery, technology, something that change. We have a partnership that is on the field, is not in theory. This is my impression, but not because I want to just to pass the ball to another, but to create something that is, for our future, I think is necessary for the climate change goal that we have to achieve.
Ambassador Amrani says you have such a deal in mind that's already happened. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for raising this question. It's very important. I don't want to say that Morocco, again, took the lead in this direction. We have signed last month the Green Partnership with the European Union. This is good for Morocco because it is within our priorities, but it's good for our Africa and good for Europe, because at the end of the day, what is important, how we can connect the networks. We have other projects, like the gas pipeline from Nigeria to Morocco, and will have some perspective for Europe. This is, I think, what we're doing is to connect the networks. It's important, and energy is the issue.
In that Green Deal, what is one of the first things we're going to see concrete that's going to come to fruition?
We'll see concrete. We already started with the OCP, with desalinization, through the hydrogen. We have taken the lead since a long time ago. The solar energy.
But in this latest deal, there's a desalinization project.
There's a project, a lot of projects, and OCP, where we are, is going to produce water, not only for its own use for the OCP, but also for drinking water, for sanitation, and so on. So this is, I think, other priorities. We have to start somewhere to work together for the future. And that's why this cooperation with Europe is important.
So I'm starting to see questions coming thick and fast, so I'm going to go to a couple of people. Sir, if I could get yours first, and could you introduce yourself for those in the audience who might be watching virtually?
Thank you very much. I also has an observation about the question, the original question.
But could you introduce yourself? There's some people who can't see you.
What do you want to do? Stand up?
No, just say who you are.
Okay.
I know, but there are some people who the cameras aren't on him.
I just wanted to raise two questions, or two points.
The first one, Minister of Egypt.
The first one is about your question. What should the South do in order to attract the North to enter into a meaningful dialogue? In my opinion, the question should be addressed to the North. How would the North, what the North would do in order to retrieve the credibility that is being eroded by the day. So the question is should not be addressed to the South, but to the North. And that is the first point. The second point is about our colleague from Italy, who's an old friend. Anyway, he raised the issue, very important issue, that we have to reorganize the table. But then when you explained about how to reorganize the table, you resorted to the old arguments about, yes, you are going to help, ready to help in water, in agriculture, etc. That is not the point. Because also, you need the South, you need the oil, you need the gas, so that we can give you and you can give us. That is what should make the table reorganized, not a high chair or high seat and a low one. There is a new world. The new world is there, and you have to change the state of mind in addressing the South. It's not a question of respect, it's a question of credibility of the North.
May I ask a quick follow? Are Russia and China stealing a march on the North in the way they treat this global South?
My next point is that, what do you mean by North? There is the North in the West and the North in the East.
Yeah.
Are you talking on behalf of the North of the East too, or you are talking about the Western?
I've on purpose not defined it because I didn't want to get in trouble with the audience.
See, that's so. Then at the end, I want to tell you, the parliamentarian coming from Italy, that ambassadors can be also as clear as you think parliamentary members are. So.
To be precise on the point, sorry, with all the respect that with the ministry, I misused some word. When I was speaking about the table, this is metaphorical, of course, I was speaking about the real strategy of some global political actor like Russia, referring to this famous sentence, not so lucky, of Barack Obama, you are a regional power. No, this is the point that some political actors are saying there is no multilateral asymmetric asset based on the West, and there is a new world order. Just because you made a lot of mistakes, like you did, we want to do as well. So I think this is something that as European, and I think as, let's say, based on multilateral criteria, we cannot accept. But I was not referring that we should close let's say, the table with some actor and the other outside. Because, of course, this complex multipolar order is difficult nowadays to reorganize in multilateral institutional asset. Before it was more easy. The world was divided, correct. Let's organize the world divided, and we close the Helsinki, let's say, chapter, so on. Nowadays, the outcome of this chaos can be Yalta again. I don't like this idea, that the winner of the war will sit and organize the table. I prefer always to be based on multilateral Helsinki principle. When I'm saying this, of course, I'm also speaking not just politically, but also in terms of international trade relation, international, let's say, business community hybrid organization, because nowadays you don't have just state or supranational institution. You have also global actors that are more influent than the state. We know what we are speaking about. So how to reorganize this table, let's call it the world order table, it's not easy. Because somebody say, okay, we do Western, we collect ourselves in an alliance and we see how to deal. In my opinion, it's more complex, because even if I don't give up on my principle of liberal democratic approach, I know that I have to speak with people that they put in the constitution that they are leader for life, and they don't believe in liberal democracy. But what do we do? Or we do like, let's say, confrontation that sometimes goes out also in military confrontation, or we try to renegotiate who is going to participate in this table. So of course, I'm closing, this interest is also based on how we organize the horizon and the competition and the production. I prefer to be competitive like we have been in the last century, producing better jobs, producing better machinery, producing with intelligence some development, because the European, the Western, they were great for this in the last century. And nowadays the competition on sustainable. And we have a sister that for life, with the Mediterranean hub, that is let's say the official center office of this joint venture, that is Europe and Africa. For me, it's logical in terms of political willing.
If I may reflect back what I'm hearing from both of you, I mean, in answer to your question, what do we mean by the wider Atlantic? I guess the common perception of that is the EU West, but also including the Five Eyes, you know, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US. That, for most mainstream media journalists in the United States, is probably what we think about. And then the question that I would ask, but I want to hear from them, but I'll just throw this out there, is the problem the attitude that this North has that's turning off the global South, or is it what's on offer, or a combination of both? I'm just going to leave that out there and go to, could you introduce yourself and give us your question and comment?
Right. Thank you very much indeed. My name is Jonas Ade. I'm from Ethiopia. And my comment is, I think what's missing in this cooperation, particularly in the Atlantic, by the way, I should thank you very much for this excellent organization and opportunity, the organizers. And I think one missing link here is women leadership. If we really had women, because of this naturally gifted multitasked orientation and understanding by nature, I think we would have lessened the discussion and the problem that we face today, be it multilateralism, be it at family management, be it managing even unilaterally as well as multilaterally. I think we have to, whenever we talk about governance, shall we focus on that gender aspect, particularly bringing women to the front line?
Because you think women are more collaborative?
More collaborative, more understanding very well, because I accommodate not only the children here, but also the problems as well, differences as well. They are happy to celebrate diversity. So I think they are more collaborative, at the same time also more imaginative. And now things are almost changing in schools. I'm a university professor. Achievements, engagement, active participation are now gradually changing. So this changing leads me to my question now. This is a comment I wanted to make.
I'm about to go to a woman to get a question from her, but I have a quick question for you, being from Ethiopia.
Yes.
The latest I've heard from aid organizations is that Ethiopia is on the verge of declaring a famine. Much of the foreign aid need is being unmet, and they predict that by next year, 60 to 80% of that need it's getting worse and worse with the focus on Ukraine, other issues. What do you think is the lasting effect going to be on Ethiopians if that's how it plays out next year?
Honestly speaking, we should see things holistically and in its complexity, not at once. Ethiopia's conflict, Ukraine's conflict, it has global structural dimension.
But do you feel ignored?
I understand very clearly, to be honest. Anything, anywhere that conflict happens, it could be masterminded or remote controlled by somewhere else. So it doesn't simply end in Ethiopia. We say in peace philosophy...
Peace masterminded by somewhere else, what do you mean by that?
Oh, okay, there's Western influence, there's Eastern conflict, there's different conflicting interests in Ethiopia as well as in the Horn of Africa as a whole. So it has structural causes, going back to colonial time, going back to slave trade time. So you have these accumulated problems, not at once. In conflict studies, we always see from conflict complexity, not one cause, one effect relationship. That is quite very simplifying, not understanding the science very clearly, to be honest. Back to my question. My question is, how do the North perceive the South? How do they particularly understand Africa? Is it still, I heard this morning, excellent interventions here. They were reprimanding and criticizing Latin America, Africa, and Asia for not using the vocabulary by saying Russian invasion in Ukraine. Rather, you are still not siding with us, so putting our words into our mouths rather than understanding context and appreciating differences in diversity. How do they still perceive, how do the West, how do the North, global North perceive their part in terms of partnership? And the following question from that is it possible to talk about redesigning multilateralism without redesigning multidimensional thinking?
Okay, so now let's just take, because I'm being like the mom who nags everyone to make their bed, so I'm being equally rude to everyone to move them on. But let's just take that, the one question that he was asking, what does the North think of the South? Prime Minister, from your perspective, the old way of thinking was, oh, the South is corrupt, the South has high levels of poverty, low levels of education. Have they moved beyond that? They being the North as I just sort of articulated it.
Yeah, je pense que...
Well, I believe that the way in which the North sees the South is rather according to what the South really is worth. In the past, Trump had very injurious words towards Africans. He said it very bluntly and very openly. And this really gives you an idea of what the West thinks of the South and how they see it. And as I said before, the respect is not given and merit is not given. If President Trump, during 4 years during his term, didn't even put a foot or step in Africa, it's because maybe he had a wrong idea about Africa, because he was saying that America is not giving away a donation or a grant that they need and all the money that they need. So if we want to be respected, we have to produce. We need to produce. We need to industrialize ourselves. We need to grow our industrialization. If India, China are becoming or growing to be respected, well, it is simply because China and India have understood the secret of respect, what it does, and the South needs to showcase this. Just to close, Europe and the United States, so the North, the global North, have actually gone to China to get the masks. Could they get them from anywhere else if they weren't in China?
The Trump administration, the Honorable Peter Pham came here to the Atlantic Dialogues many times, and he was the representative to the Great Lakes. So I know from State Department briefings I was getting at the time that President Trump might not have come here, but from that administration to this administration, there is a serious group of people looking at this continent. But I'm not here to defend them, but Peter especially was a friend of the dialogue, so I had to speak in his defense. Ambassador Amrani, you wanted to add? Sorry, just a second. I will let you speak. Just the ambassador is pulling rank on you. Just a second.
I will be very brief to respond directly to your question. Today, everybody is interested by Africa. All of you on the North are running. Today, in America, there is a summit EU-Africa, Europe-Africa, China-Africa, Russia-Africa, Turkey-Africa. Why? Simple question. Of course, there's a competition today in Africa to make business for our raw materials, to sell products. This is the reality. I am now in South Africa. Everybody wants to do business with, and there is a big competition because they want to face Russia and China, the US, and Europe in Africa. So I think they respect us, but they want something more from us. And we know what they want, everybody. Today there's a summit, head of states in Washington for the reason, competition, because Africa is the future for the international cooperation.
Ma'am, you wanted to add your thoughts. Could you reintroduce yourself to the crowd?
My name is Obieza Kwesili. I was listening to this conversation, and it just sounded like we actually regressed in the way that we're having conversations around.
Is it my questions?
Yeah, I wasn't comfortable. I really wasn't. I mean, look, there's this level of paternalism that we should let go of. You know, when you talk about when we have this kind of a conversation, and you start saying things like, you have people who visited Africa. We don't need visits. What are we doing with visits? I think that the issue is that the rest of the world needs to stop looking at Africa as a humanitarian case. Africa is a business case.
So you're saying that although the Trump administration, the Biden administration, the Obama administration sent many of their people here, you didn't see concrete results on the ground that gave you confidence in continuing that relationship?
Yeah, the American foreign policy is broken. It's important to acknowledge that both Europe and America are struggling in terms of their leadership of the global space, precisely because they have refused to advance in the bureaucratic understanding of the changes that have gone on in the world. And so when you talk about Africa from a certain perspective that remains paternalistic, it is absolutely annoying to those of us who know that respect does not even have to be based on production. Just the basic human dignity of respect has to be on the table. And then the second thing is that none of us as Africans must in any way not take on our leaders when they fail to govern properly. Our leaders owe us accountable governance. So it shouldn't be a zero-sum game. I'm going to defend African leaders when they are hopelessly incompetent? No, I won't do that. But I will also not sit in a room where I listen to paternalistic conversation on Africa. I think that for us to make progress in these kinds of gatherings, it's important to isolate the issues. I lived in Berlin for some months.
But is it important that I brought up some of the lowest common denominator paternalistic attitudes that still exist? I just spent 4 months in India and got a much more detailed understanding of their relationship and their history with Russia and why they're in a very different space.
I mean, listen, I'm not even blaming you, but I'm saying that
you're frustrated with it over and over and over.
With the way that the question comes. So we're not advancing in terms of our readiness for collaboration and for cooperation, for the language that leads to partnership of the kind that produces results. And what I want to see is an advancement in the content. We should be analytical. You know what? You think that anyone in Europe who is right now erecting walls against Africans is not looking at the data on migration and on what migration does for economic growth? You think they don't know that the demographic changes would be against Europe at a certain stage, and that they're going to be needing...
They're going to be needing migrants.
Do you understand?
Oh, no, I understand.
So all of these issues are the kinds of issues we should be addressing. And I think that a major part of this broken conversation is coming from seeing Africa as a means of competition between the asinine, very asinine great power competition.
As Minister Musa said,
yes,
the Northeast and the Northwest using this as their
precisely,
chessboard.
And we must change that. So when you, as a CNN anchor,
I'm not an anchor. I'm a global affairs analyst.
All right. So,
yeah.
Well, but
I come on and I hold forth with my analysis.
So you hold some leverage. So the quality of the conversation when it comes to Africa must be a conversation that's substantial, not a conversation that has people having to answer to things that really, look at it.
No, speaking of substantial, we have 5 minutes left.
Yeah,
so I have to, and they've told me I must be on time.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I was suffocating.
But also so we were supposed to have we were supposed to have a woman panelist, and she got Rita got hung up at the airport. She's probably trying to make her way still. You're here. Please. You've been listening to some of this. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Can you introduce yourself and perhaps with apologies to the gentleman on stage, give us your closing thoughts to help us close this out. So basically, you've heard some of the conversation. Okay, so I'll just put a question to you. The major back and forth that we've had is the North, if you consider it being Europe, Canada, the US, that North, has sometimes displayed a still paternalistic attitude, has sometimes forgotten Africa or treated it as an afterthought. Since you've come from Portugal, how would you grade how Europe is doing in its outreach to Africa, especially with the horrors of, for instance, the Ukraine war going on?
Okay, so thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Rita Faden. I'm the president of the Luso-American Development Foundation, which is a foundation that brings together Portugal and the United States. And so, straight to your question, what is the North Atlantic, let's say what we usually say the West? That's a major issue. Probably we haven't done enough. And the reality is that with this war in Ukraine, which for Europeans is an existential war, the attention span is even shorter. It shouldn't probably be like that, but that's the reality. For any European, this is really, I mean, we see our future at stake here. And so all our attention, our political attention, the funding, the energy is very much concentrated on the war in Ukraine. Of course, I mean, as human beings, we can always think of more than one thing at the same time. So that's
especially since it seems, as we've discussed somewhat in the crowd, that Russia and China are stealing a march in terms of investment in Africa, defense cooperation, and setting up, and also doing it in a way that often seems more respectful to African leaders than Europe or the US in their approach.
I understand when you say the concept of being respectful, but I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
Because, I mean, underneath the supposed respectful, there are other demands that perhaps are not so straightforward. I know that sometimes Europe comes when I mean, our cooperation is very much based on conditions and human rights conditions and democracy conditions, but we put them at front. What we have with Russia and China is that we don't have those types of conditions up front, but then we have other hidden conditions and other hidden negotiations that sometimes I think can be more harmful for the development of the countries. But I mean, as in everything in life, there's no exclusivity.
In terms of debt trap policies.
Yeah, of course. And then in terms of the demands that they then do from an economic point of view, for countries that in Africa that they can seemingly try to help.
So my last question, I'm going to give 15 seconds to each of you. First to you, and then I'm going to go to the stage. Are you hopeful that Africa, that Europe and Africa are going to start having a better relationship?
Yes, because it must be so. So I think there's a clear conscience that for our future, our common future, and I believe very much, we live in a globalized, interconnected world. There's no going back from that. There can be some hiccups, but that's the way, that's the future. And so for that future, I think we must, there's no other way than to strengthen the relations. Multilateralism for me is the key. And working together, trying to find partnerships. There's lots of things already happening in the Atlantic. So, sorry.
Okay, so going, just to wrap it up, Prime Minister, we're going to go from you and end up with, are you checking the score or something? Yes. Prime Minister, are you positive, are you hopeful that the North will start paying more attention and treating the Global South with more respect?
Je pense que nous devons être réalistes, nous, les...
I think we have to be realistic, us African, and I am African, and if we want to catch the attention, the good attention from the West, we have to behave consequently. In political and economic sphere, there is no ethics, there is no morality. In politics, only interests are important. You're not going to really ask the West to respect you whilst you're not really getting it. You're not going to ask Europe to respect you when you're not up to it and up to deserving. As much the African migrants going through the Mediterranean are chased out from Europe, as much other citizens are coming to Europe without visa. The United States likewise. As much they build walls against Mexico, but at the same time they are given a possibility to other countries up to and including other citizens from Europe to come to the U.S. without visa. That boils down to what, madam? It boils down to the fact that the respect, and with that I'm going to conclude, in terms of leadership, in terms of governance, the respect must be deserved. One. And second, if Africa, just like a nice woman who wants to catch attention, but Africa must really embellish itself. The African beauty in the case in point is the production, is the quantity, is the quality. Thank you.
Minister, your 15-second prediction.
Yeah, no, but look, me, I'm very basic, and I'm very used to the political arena, so I'm not diplomatic.
En fait, en tant que
And I always say to what I think to the European that they have this hypocrite approach to the cooperation system. and also to our African friends that were in government for years and now they blame on the Western. So I'm very tough on the point because we have an option. The main roots of the European integration process is what we have to build up in the world. Europe is not a fortress that we close ourselves in peace and wealth and we think that the world around us is a paradise or something that we have to have far away from us. So our global action is the main base of the European integration. And when we speak about global action, we have to be concrete, because the blah, blah, blah on the governance institution, multilateralism for 10 years was going on, and the result is zero. We had the UN system that was smashed by COVID in terms of protecting the people. We have the Security Council that is not able to do anything in case of conflict. So let's start from kind of approach that is pragmatic, look in the reality, look in the target that is the climate change and saving the planet. And let's be honest, let's be based in a cooperation that is useful if we have concrete approach. If we start to say what we have done in the last 20 years, Europeans, they are wonderful in self-criticism. We can organize Congress of the European and for months blame ourselves for what we have done in the last 10th century. We are beautiful. But the most impressive things that also in this dialogue, in the panel that we had since this morning, is to look the agenda, look the concrete action that we have to deliver in a time that is quite turbulent.
Thank you.
For what we live. So let me also close on football. I didn't speak about football, Ambassador, because I come from a country that we believe in bad luck and good luck. So we always not speak about football before the match because you never know, you know. But my heart is with you, don't worry.
Thank you. Thank you for the support. 15 seconds.
Yes, sir.
It is all about ambition. If our ambition is to build bridges, that will work. Because we are facing the same challenges: climate change, migration, terrorism, and so on. So one country or group of countries alone cannot face these challenges. So we need to work together. So common responses for common challenges in order to build our future. But for me, the multilateralism is only one speed, not two speeds. Is one. We need to work together, and we need to forget, I'm sorry, this issue of respect. Because at the end of the day, what matters are the interests of our people, of our young generation, for job, for stability, and for growth.
Thank you. And one last question, your prediction for the game?
Bad luck.
I support the Italian. I don't want to make any prognostic.
On that note, thank you very much. I believe we have a brief break, but we have another panel coming straight up. We do not have a break. Stay in your seats. Do not move. You don't need more caffeine yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the moderator of the third plenary session, international TV presenter and journalist, Ali Aslan.
After decades of economic integration, the world seems to be fragmenting again. The war in Ukraine seems to further deepen this impression of a suffering international order, and this, especially in the wider Atlantic, where a difference of views divides the North and the South Atlantic. Institutions of multilateralism, such as the United Nations and its manifold agencies, have been criticized for their lack of efficiency and their institutional sclerosis. They have been challenged by the Global South for their unfair governing structures. Pressure
Let's start right away, Dominic. We don't want to be late for the match, so obviously that is something that no one will forgive us in this part of the world. We will end at 7:15 sharp, but until then, Dominic, there's a lot to be discussed here because obviously inflation is surging nearly everywhere, impacting nearly everyone. The drivers, of course, we've talked about it throughout the day. I think it's fairly well known. The pandemic, of course, the disruption to the global supply chain, as well as the war in Ukraine, of course, which is causing high energy and food prices to skyrocket. What I want to know from you is, as a very experienced economist, how exceptional, if at all, is this current situation that we find ourselves in?
Well, may I add to the drivers, COVID and war, the pent-up demand, because a lot of demand has been refrained during the COVID and came out at the end. Well, I think it's rather exceptional. Exceptional because it's an exceptional period. We have been experiencing 10, 15 years, 20 years of globalization. And what we're living now is a period of fragmentation. See the IRA, for instance, in the United States, or things like this. So the question that we must try to answer, I mean, there's three questions for me. One is, how long is it going to last? Second, will we have a so-called wage prices spiral, you know, the second round effect? And second, should we let monetary policy alone to try to solve the problem? And the first question is not that easy because it may last rather long, depending on how sticky the prices are. I think Ottaviano is defending the idea that they're very sticky, and I'm afraid he's right. But there's a counter-argument, the so-called bullwhip effect, which explains that in such period you may have overproduction, which will make the prices down. Nevertheless, I think that to this first question, the answer is it will last rather long. The second is it's not exceptional because we know very well this kind of a second round effect between wages and prices. Again, two arguments. One is that the labor markets in the West are pretty tight, so difficult to avoid increase in wages. On the other hand, the bargaining power of the wage earners has been eroded during the last decade. So again, you don't know, but I still think, second answer, that it will happen. The most funniest thing in this month of December 2022 is that an institution which has to fight against this second round effect, namely the ECB, may be under strike of its salaries because they won't increase in wages. So they will experience in the reality what it means. And then the third question, which makes things very new, is that there is a kind of a contradiction between, on one hand, the European Union, at least in Europe, where the countries have unleashed a huge package to avoid people to suffer too much and decreasing by this package the real price of energy for the people, which in textbook will appear as something which is very inflationary because fiscal expansion is supposed to. But there are some features that the textbook cannot capture, especially the fact that there is something such a disinflationary fiscal expansion, in my view, when those kind of subvention is used to maybe not to maintain at the same level, but at least to diminish the price of energy, you may avoid the second round effect. And avoiding the second round effect, finally, you make more against inflation than the monetary policy itself. So it's a very new situation from this point of view. The second thing which is new in monetary policy is that during the last 10 years, central bank models have proven to be useless. They're based on old data. They cannot take into account change in regime changes or tail events, and so they're just useless. And still, central bank want to apply the traditional policy. It looks to me as if you will be seeing nails everywhere just because you have a large hammer. So the point is now that in the US, fine. The demand is big, and the Fed has some rational in his behavior. In Europe, where obviously a large part of inflation is imported, I cannot believe that it's the appropriate policy. You know, it's having a generalized monetary policy tightening where the excess demand is localized is something which appears to me